Hello and welcome everyone. I'm Corey from Aquarium Co-op, and today I'm going to talk about my top 10 small aquarium fish. This can kind of mean small aquariums like nano aquariums. It can also just mean smaller fish, and in general it's going to be the same thing. Things I'm thinking about with that fish doesn't get that big, it probably will do pretty well in your smaller tank as well. So up for number one, I've got the Celestial Pearl Danio. This is a fish that really is come on strong in the last 15 years or so. It looks like a little trout, got all the spots. The coloration on the fins looks really good. This is an expensive fish. It's not uncommon to see them anywhere from $6 to $10 each. They are a schooling fish, so minimum of 6. So even though they only get about that big, which is about an inch, inch and a quarter, they do need to be in a group. So that designates an aquarium of at least 5 gallons or so and going up. The more you have, the better. They are a shy fish. So if you have a lot of activity around the aquarium, they're going to hide back in the plants, and they do appreciate cover like plants. That helps them come out more. Not as quite bright a light helps as well. They like cooler temperatures. They're not impossible to breed, but can be bred. And your normal community tank water parameters, kind of 7.0 pH, moderate mineral content, and a little bit lower in the temperature does them well. Now, they can go with a lot of stuff, but the main thing I would say, if you were at my store buying from me, the thing to watch out for is how they feed. They only feed mid-water, so they don't feed off the top, they don't eat off the bottom. It's got to be in the middle. So you need food that floats for a long time in the middle. Stuff like flake and micro pellets, they'll come down, but once they hit the floor, they're done. So what we find works really well are things like frozen cyclops, frozen baby brine shrimp, live baby brine shrimp, daphnia, anything that can keep the food just kind of going around in the middle there, and that's what you're looking for. So sometimes if you don't have that kind of food, you can feed a little bit, let it drop, come back like 5 minutes later, a little bit, let it drop again, and let your cleanup crew below clean up after them. But know that that's not an ideal solution. Finding a food that's going to work for you is very important. And frozen foods and live foods work the best for this. Yeah, so good luck with them. Enjoy them. They're a great fish and a kind of a must-have for a smaller tank. Next up, we've got the Brigitei Rasbora. This thing is awesome. Sometimes called the chili Rasbora. Only gets about that inch again, fire red once they're colored up. When they're young, they're not colored up yet. So when you see them in a store, you're just like, who would buy that fish? It's $4. It doesn't even look cool. But you see one 6 months down the road and you're like, I'd pay $10 for that fish. What is that? And that's what you're investing in. So you get a group of those. Now these guys, yeah, minimum 6, but 10 or more really, the bigger the group, because they're a slender fish. They do school up really nice and they tend to be out and about, and that red looks amazing if you're doing live plants. Get yourself a decent sized group. Normal community water parameters there. They're not picky about anything. Just know that with this microfish, food is an issue. And you're going to see that's a common theme with a lot of these fish is like, oh, it's hard. They got really small mouths. What do we do? Again, they don't really eat from the top. They don't really eat from the bottom. So frozen foods, the frozen baby brine, frozen cyclops, frozen daphnia, live baby brine, live daphnia, freeze-dried if you soak it a little bit and get it to whirl around in there. Crushed up flake food, all that kind of stuff is going to be what you're going to feed them. And wide variety helps get that super red color out of them. And trust me, if you've ever seen one in person, it is amazing. You're going to see a picture probably in some video and you're like, that looks good. But just know that when you see it in person, you'll have to own it. Next up, we've got the Pygmy Corydoras. So it's a baby kind of Corydora that gets that 3/4 of an inch to an inch. And this is going to be the perfect thing to clean up after all these little micro fish up above there we're trying to feed, and it's hard, and you got food resting on the bottom. This is a great micro fish to do that. They're pretty easy to feed because micro pellets, anything that hits the bottom, they're going to want to slurp up and eat. So they eat everything we've mentioned before, but then they'll also eat wafers and rapashi food and pretty much anything you throw at them. They are a schooling fish. I recommend, guess what, 6 or more. They're in the $3 to $4 range typically, and they can be a little bit hard to find. And there's some sister species like Habrosus and Hastatus. But in general, they all pretty much like that community range and are a great addition. Next up, another bottom dweller. What? 2 in a row? Yes. The Kuhli Loach. Now, this isn't a microfish. It's a fish that gets about, 3-4 inches or so. They're slender. They do well in smaller tanks. They do well with smaller fish. They eat off the bottom. They're not picky. both water parameter wise, tank mate wise, food wise. They look cool. They look like little miniature snakes. So they got the stripe pattern, or you can get the all black ones, or you can get a silver Kuhli Loach. In general, they're just a great tank addition if you're not doing things like shrimp. All right, next we have a Tetra. Finally a Tetra, the green neon Tetra. Now, some people might say that just looks like a neon Tetra. Well, it stays smaller, so that's one benefit it's got going to it. And it's a green, not a red and a blue, but it's a green. And especially if you look down on it, so if you have a tank that's a little bit lower and you look down on it, you really, really see that green stand out. Now, if you're looking at it head on, a little bit green, and looking up, you almost might go, that's more blue than green. Some reason when you look it down at an angle, it's really green. Same as the other midwater schoolers. They're not going to eat off the top or the bottom. They want to eat midwater. We know what food that is already. They can go a little bit more acidic, so that's kind of nice if you're running a high CO2 tank. But in general, standard community fish parameters, they'll thrive for you. They're a lot of times wild caught. And definitely quarantine them. They can come in with ick and fin rot and things like that. And hopefully you see them at a store and they're just really thriving, and you can quarantine them just for a bit and then get them into your main display tank. The next one I've got for you is a killifish, and it's known as the clown killifish or the rocket killifish. These guys simply just look amazing. They hang out in the top 1/3 of your aquarium, and they will rocket right out of there if you don't have a tight-fitting lid. So that's the thing to know about them, is gotta be tight-fitting lid. That hole that's this big because you had a heater there, but then you replaced the heater and never plugged up the hole, there went all of your clown killies. They jumped right out. So really, you gotta cover it really well. Don't leave the lid open when you feed and walk away and come back 2 hours later and you got one on the floor. They really are jumpers, but the good news is they will eat off the top, so feeding them is pretty easy. Flake food, anything that floats, freeze-dried bloodworms and things like that. Yeah, they have smaller mouths, but being a killifish, proportional to their size, their mouth's kind of big. So they're very easy, and they do well with a lot of other fish, and they look amazing. The male's obviously better than the females. The females are kind of muted color, less tails. They typically go for $5 or $6. You can find them a little bit cheaper and definitely more expensive. But in general, $5 or $6. Get male or females and a group. I would say no less than a trio, kind of a male and 2 females. But, you know, the more the merrier. Next up, we got another Tetra for you, the Ember Tetra, a nice bright, bold red. And it comes in that like 1.25 inch package. Pretty cheap, you know, they're usually $4 and under. Very hardy, I would say. So they do well in the small tanks that we typically keep them in. We can keep them in big groups. That's one of the nice things. You might have a 30-gallon tank and you go, I want a giant school of fish. We'll put 20 or 30 of those in there, and that handles that, and it's kind of affordable. But you're going 30 fish at $4, $120. Maybe you can strike a deal with your local store and stuff like that. So pretty easy to feed, mid-water feeder. They'll eat a little bit more off the top and the bottom. They're a little more outgoing, not as shy, but they don't want to eat that way. So keep in mind, still mid-water. You're probably mixing with some of these other fish anyway. Next up, finally a live bear, Panda Guppies. Now, the Panda Guppies aren't just your normal guppy. They're bred to be smaller. So the males only get about 1 inch. The females do push that 1.75 inches, 2 inches, but they've got short fins, so instead of that guppy tail it's huge normally, it's got a nice tight tail to it, and they look great, kind of that blue, silver, and black look to them. I really enjoy them. I have them in a pond right now, and I like looking at them from up top. I like looking at them in an aquarium. They make more. I really love them. What I like about them is they're not fussy. Yeah, they got to have pH above 7. They need to have some hardness in the water, but they'll eat off the ground. They'll eat midwater. They'll eat top water. They get along with everything. They're scavengers. They kind of do it all, and that's what I love about them. In a small tank, they're making more, and you got plants, and they eat everything. You don't have to have bottom dwellers if you don't want to. They're not the easiest to find, though. A lot of the other fish on here might be easier to find. These sell really well. We don't have them, you know, maybe half the time if we're lucky. That's one of the reasons why I breed them, is they're very sought after. Typically, you're going to see them for anywhere from $12 to $30 a pair, depending on the quality. Are they Dumbo ear or aren't they? Were they locally bred? Aren't they? Is it just males? Can you get males and females? What's the color quality on them? What's the availability? Sometimes you find out, oh, I'm the only one in the state. They sell for $20 a pair, and sometimes everyone's got them. They're $12 a pair, and then next year they go up again. One of my favorites, and I recommend you take a look at them and give them a try. Next up, we have a Rainbowfish, the Gertrude rainbow. Now, this rainbow fish only gets about 1.5 inches. that light blue coloration. They school around. They're in that top third most times. They can be in the middle, but they like to be up top. They will eat from the surface, which is nice. They eat mid-water. A trio is the minimum, kind of a male and 2 females. The males look better than the females, like with a lot of fish. They do appreciate harder water, higher pH. Temperature, they can go quite wide. They do great in a planted tank. You can spawn them and things like that. But really, you're buying this fish because you like the way they look. Just know that they're 10, 12, 15 bucks a piece. So that's why all of a sudden you might be only getting 3 or 4 because they're pretty spendy, but they're quite a nice looking fish. They're not super long lived. They might only live for you for like 3 years or so. They will hop out of your aquarium as well if you don't have a lid. So do know that. But usually people fall in love with them and they end up keeping them for many, many, many years because as they kind of die off, they either bred more or they're buying more because you just miss that action. They're very colorful and they flare and spar with their tank mates trying to get their attention, and they're just a great fish. So last but not least, an algae eater. The Borneo sucker loach. Now, this is a hill stream species type loach. It's got a big sucker mouth on it, and the Borneo sucker loach specifically is a much smaller fish. If you're used to keeping reticulated hill stream loaches that kind of get 3 inches, these guys get like 1.5 inches maybe, and they're much more slender, but they've got the same properties as a hill stream loach in that they'll eat algae, they'll eat stuff on the ground, they'll clean wood and all that, and they just look kind of cool, and they're usually not too expensive, usually 10 bucks and under. The hardest part is catching them at the store, and ever if you have to move the tank, oof, it's a nightmare. Normal community parameters, they can go a little bit cooler actually, so you don't have to keep them hot. They can go in an unheated tank if you'd like. They're definitely, if you're in an office setting or something like that, people are like, what is that thing? Is that a flounder? It's crazy. So it's got all that going for it, and it's a great one of. You don't have to have a group of them. You can, definitely, but a one of fish does really well in your community tank. So those are my suggestions. If you enjoyed, hit a thumbs up. If you didn't, well, I'm sorry. I'll try harder next time. If you want to find more education about aquariums, visit our blog on aquariumcoop.com. We release articles every week, whether it's about a species of fish, a disease, plants, anything kind of freshwater, community tank related, we focus on. And you can sign up for the newsletter and you'll get one of those every week. If you just want to support what we're doing, go ahead and order from us. We ship everywhere in the United States. And we sell plants and foods and things like that. Just no live fish and no aquariums. Really, that's what it comes down to. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.